Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the voices of young people.
Hello, welcome back. This is season 7 of the Voices of Young People podcast. I'm Marta Abawaji, the head of community engagement. And today's conversation continues our mental health and Gen Z series. We have 2 awesome young men who are speaking to us today. They come from very different corners of the globe currently because one of them is studying abroad. You'll get to hear a bit more about that. But I'm so pleased to have Ivan and Sam entering this conversation today. Let's hear from Ivan. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Marta, for inviting me on this podcast. And it's a pleasure to speak with you, Marta, and Sam. So hello, everyone. My name is Ivan. I use he, him pronouns. I am 21 years of age. And I am currently living in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I am studying abroad here in Latin America for the semester. I originally was born in New York City, but raised in El Paso, Texas. And I usually call my home base New York, where I am a junior, double majoring in politics and Spanish and Portuguese with a minor in social and public policy at NYU. I am a proud Latino and Hispanic, a son of immigrants from the Dominican Republic of Nicaragua, as well as a devout Catholic. And yes, and I think a fun fact about me is I love to travel. And in this month alone, I've been to 3 countries, including Argentina, as well as the countries of Uruguay and Chile. That's a little bit about me.
So awesome, Ivan. Something extra cool about Ivan is that he is slated to be an intern with Springtide this coming summer. We're recording this podcast before his internship has begun, but it's been so fun to already be in touch before that begins, especially even as you're studying abroad. So thank you, Ivan. We also have Sam with us today. Sam, tell us where you're at and what you're up to.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm currently living in Portland, Oregon in the US. And I'm part of this Jewish gap year program called Tivnu. And so basically I'm living with 16 other peers in 2 houses in a neighborhood in Portland. And we are doing social justice and direct service internship work during the week, and then various Jewish programming and group building and educational stuff on the weekends and when we're not working. My family is Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern and Central and Western Europe. And I am a Jew. I really care about my Jewish practice and what it means to be Jewish in my life. And another interesting thing, I guess I would say about me is that I spent a lot of my time in high school playing music and doing climate organizing. And both of those things I try to continue doing now.
So Ivan, you shared you are 21. How old are you, Sam?
I'm 19.
19. Awesome. That's always helpful for our listeners to know just what stage of life these young people are in. But I'm so impressed with both of you, the breadth of work you're doing, the passions that you're integrating into your studies and into this gap year focused on social justice with other Jewish young people. Sam, I couldn't be more delighted to have your voices in conversation with Springtide. So let's dive into this mental health conversation. I'm curious off the bat, when you hear the phrase mental health, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think, at least for me, I think when I think of mental health, I just really think of overall well-being of one's psyche and one's emotional state. I think to have a good mental health is really for one to have the ability to just be and to perceive and experience one's life in the best way possible without any sort of major inhibitions or barriers. And so for me, when I think of mental health, I think of health and something that is deeply important to every single human being. But I'm really interested in your perspective, Sam. What do you think when you think of mental health?
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head when talking about well-being. I think for me, mental health really encompasses well-being, particularly emotional well-being. But our whole beings are interconnected, so it's not, you can't separate our emotions from our thoughts, from our physical feelings. We're connected beings. So and for me, emotional well-being is feeling connected to myself and other people and being present with my emotions and my thoughts, and really having the ability to use my mind to think creatively. And I think one of the biggest struggles I see myself and my peers having, our big emotional struggles are taking place in the isolation of the pandemic, with the looming threat of climate catastrophe and the crumbling of our society's institutions.
I hear that. There's definitely some particularities for your generation of how the mental health conversation is arriving. The presence of it in terms of present concerns like you named, but also just the presence of, I think the conversation is a lot more available, where previous generations, it was brushed aside. It was like, you don't talk about this, because mental health is more prominent now in terms of people doing research, people encouraging mental health to be taken seriously. Where do you hear messages about mental health?
For me, a lot of the messages I've got are from friends and people giving presentations in school, and a lot of that revolved around talking about destigmatizing mental health struggles and thinking about coping strategies.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Sam, at least in my experience. I think that a lot of it has been from school, but I think, fellow peers and fellow young people sort of really emphasizing the need to talk about mental health, and to really sort of this idea of becoming very transparent in one's emotional well-being, and to sort of exemplify whether one is going through a rough patch or not, or whether one is feeling at peace with themselves. And so I really think that most of the messaging that I have sort of received about mental health has sort of came from friends and fellow peers at school, outside of school, and on social media.
Right.
That's helpful to know.
And I think for me, I've had some difficulties with some of the messaging around mental health that I've heard. And I think the two biggest parts that don't really click with the way I experience it is the way that where a lot of the language I hear about mental health revolves around talking about disorders, and that categorization doesn't really accurately frame the way I experience my emotions. It's not just like I have anxiety or I don't. I definitely feel scared a lot, but for me, I see that as part of the normal range of human emotions. And I think we should take the normal range of human emotions seriously in the way that people take mental health disorders. And that gives us a shot at supporting ourselves more fully.
Oh, that's really well said. That we can't just put young people in a box or a camp of like, you are experiencing this. Oh, you're not experiencing this. That there's a lot more color and variation, and the ways that even you describe your emotions or your emotional state on a given day needs to hold those nuances more is what I'm hearing from you.
Right.
Yeah, I hope our research is setting up adults to think about that nuance more. Did you want to say more about that, Sam?
Right. Yeah. And the other struggle that I've had with those messages is where I've seen a lot of times where the sort of goal that is exemplified for us as young people is coping. And it's hard for me when I feel like the message is that coping is the best we can do, because I want to go beyond coping, and I want to go through healing the hurts that I'm feeling and that I'm experiencing, and setting a goal of thriving.
Oh, man, you're speaking our language so well. The goal of this whole mental health and Gen Z series is to help institutions and organizations and trusted adults create cultures and environments that are more mental health positive. So we aren't only doing responses, which are often crisis responses even.
Right.
So I think what you're saying about coping mechanism and strategies, while that's helpful, that's still only responding. How can we be more proactive to create environments that are already setting up different dynamics that don't always need the crisis response or the coping intervention later on? What would it look like to have a more mental health positive space? So yeah, you're really touching on the goals of what our research is looking to provide, and our reports to be those actionable places for adults to cultivate a different environment. So if you were worried about your own mental health or a friend's mental health, who in your life would you turn to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, I sort of would really turn to friends more often than not. I think that although I sort of am lucky and fortunate to sort of have a lot of, well-intentioned adults in my life, I sometimes feel that there's sort of a disconnect between sort of the experiences that I myself as a young person and fellow young people go through, that older sort of people might not be able to understand. And sort of I find that peers my age and friends, I'm sort of able to go to them because they sort of welcome other people with an open heart and sort of with this idea of respect and compassion. So I think, this sort of idea that one can sort of listen without any sort of preconceived notions of judgment or stereotypes is something I think is really valuable. And that's sort of one thing that I really sort of account when I go to someone for mental health, or when it comes to getting mental health resources for a friend.
Right. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I grew up being taught that it's okay to have my feelings and express them, and turning to people I trust to listen to me. And in that vein, I am part of a peer-to-peer counseling community where we support each other through listening to each other. And this really amazing practice of sharing listening time has made a big impact on my life.
Oh, that's a really neat example. Yeah, it speaks to what I've been saying though too, that peers are the main place of support.
And it's taught me that this, the healing and the thriving that we strive for through enabling the fullest of our minds to think is really possible, because I've been able to use the process and the tool of this peer counseling in a really good way in my life.
That's tremendous. So friends are showing up for you, and peers are showing up for both of you. But I hear that disconnect, that sometimes adults in your life aren't always a safe place for mental health concerns. If you ever considered formal support, like a professional who is a therapist, for yourself or for a friend, is that something you'd be open to? Is that something you've pursued ever in the past?
Well, I think I feel like I'm actually pretty well supported by my peer counseling community.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself, I haven't really considered professional support like therapy, but I have friends who have gotten a lot from it. And it's interesting to the point about Ivan talking about the disconnect between us and adults. I definitely relate to that. And then on the flip side, the peer counseling community I'm part of has a range of ages, from people even sometimes younger than me to people who are elders. And I do peer counseling with people all across that age range. So I get the really cool opportunity of getting to think about people and be thought about by people with a lot of different life experiences and like where they're at in different stages of life, which means that like I can talk about certain things with my young people peer counselors in a better way than the older people. But in the same way, like sometimes there are struggles that I'm going through that a peer in this community who's a lot older is able to sort of support me from a position of not necessarily struggling in the same way. And that gives them like a leg to stand on in standing with me.
That's really well said in terms of ways that you can lean on people in different seasons and circumstances and be that support at different times as well. So yeah, friends are significant for both of you. I'm hearing that loud and clear. Beyond and besides that support from friends, are there specific activities that you turn to if you're feeling down or you feel like you're struggling in a particular way with mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's sort of being able to immerse myself in sort of any form of art or culture. So I am a huge fan of writing. You know, I find that to be sort of a method of sort of catharsis for me, truly, you know, and able to sort of represent my sort of feelings or emotions in a very tangible way. And I think at the same time, you know, even when I'm not sort of engaging in that sort of medium, engaging in other forms of mediums such as, you know, literature or cinema, for me, they provide amazing spaces to sort of immerse myself in a world that is not my own and to sort of distract my mind and put my mind in a place where it's so not thinking about the negative thoughts I might be having. You know, I think so one of the scariest parts about mental health is that it's not really observable for most people. You know, it's not something that one can. Exactly. Thank you. And I think it's, you know, it's just something that's why I think it's so difficult in mental health, because truly, as cliche as it may sound, we just truly never know what's going on in one's eternal state and one's eternal mind and psyche. So I find that for me, just being able to immerse myself in a world that's not my own and just distract myself, even for a little bit, and to delve into another world, just provides a lot of peace for me, because it sort of makes me forget about my problems, even if but for a moment. And for someone who might be going through a difficult moment in their lives, or that be something really, you know, maybe minuscule at the moment, such as not doing well on a test, or maybe what's it called, something very macro, such as the loss of a loved one, I think those moments of rest are just critical for one's well-being.
Yeah, rest through the arts. I love that. What about you, Sam?
It's really cool to hear that your connection to art in terms of supporting that. And I feel like I really can relate to that from a different angle at art. Music is a really important part of my life in a lot of ways, from just like playing and listening to music as part of my everyday life, to connecting to my spirituality. And one of the biggest ways I'm connected to that is grounding myself through Jewish music. So I lead music during a lot of the rituals in our program, and I think it's a really awesome way to bring us together. I heard some research that talked about that actually the experience of singing together with other people brings hormone, brings the, basically it stimulates the same brain chemicals that you get when you're having a long cuddle.
That's cool. I feel like I've heard something akin to that, but that is a really cool, cool research to say this is a way when we're in community and voices in tandem that it can set off certain brain patterns that mirror other ways that people might receive comfort.
Right. And I think it's particularly significant after the physical separation that I've been going through, before this year.
Just a quick break to give a shout out. Springtide is able to offer this podcast because of donors who make our research and actionable insights possible. Damaris, a youth minister, wrote to us saying, "At the end of each year, we evaluate if and how we met the needs of our young people. The research from Springtide has made an incredible impression on this evaluation process. Their eye-opening research has affirmed things we have done, and it has shaken other things up." You can see more of our current findings on our website, springtideresearch.org, where you can also make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options. Now, back to the episode. Our research throughout this series is really trying to set up ways that organizations can better support young people's mental health. And we have 3 driving themes that are showing up throughout our research. Those are connections, expectations, and purpose. So you both have already illustrated a sense of connection being really significant for your mental health, connection to art, sometimes connection to something bigger than yourself. But I'm wondering also connections to people. Who do you feel like in different communities you're a part of are someone that you can trust to talk to about mental health?
Well, I'm really curious about this one for you, Ivan, given that you are at college and I'm on my way to college next year. So yeah, I'm really interested.
Yeah, of course. It's like, and I'm interested to hear about, you. But I would say, for me, I am very lucky because I find that there's a lot of professors that I can sort of go to sort of, just talk about anything, about what's it called, whether it be my classes or, things that might be going on in my life. And I think that, I'm very glad because I think here at NYU, sort of professors are sort of really well equipped and trained to sort of know about all the different resources. So although, of course, professors are human and not sort of the be all end all or professional counselors, they at the very least will, if they see something that's really going on with a student, will connect other people, which I think is great. I think a lot of universities are really trying to listen to students because a lot of students are sort of and young people are just really sort of emphasizing the need for mental health. But how about you, Sam? Because, I know you're in, sort of very non-traditional, what's it called, part of your life right now.
program.
Yes.
Right. Well, I guess keeping in the same line that I've already been talking about. One of the coolest things is I've gotten to share my peer counseling practice with some of my friends here at TVNU, and it's really been honestly a revelation to get to do this practice that means a lot for me with my friends, which is actually a new thing for me. I had not done that much in high school, and I've noticed what a really big positive impact it's had on me and my friends who I've done it with. And another example of that, of the question that you were asking, is I recently, a few weeks ago, actually, I was working a particularly long day at the farm, and I got home and it was already dark and I was exhausted, but I just didn't really have much left in the tank. And I was just like, okay, how in the world do I get myself food, pack myself a lunch, and then go back to the farm less than 12 hours after I left? And, I was collapsed on the couch, and one of my friends was like, hey, Sam, you haven't taken a day off in a long time. Looks like you need one. And it took a little bit of cajoling for him to kind of convince me that I needed a day off, but he was really right. And it was a really, really special opportunity to get to see my friends pinpoint what they saw going on for me and push me to do what they thought made sense for me, which was what ended up making sense for me.
I love that people are looking out for one another like that. That actually really ties in with our expectations theme throughout our mental health research, because there's expectations on young people's time that doesn't always encourage rest. You can be packing so much in, even when it's really meaningful work that you believe in. But if you're not taking that pause or that respite, it's hard to maintain, even when you are passionate about the work you're engaging. So I love that you have people looking out for you who say, hey, you can't keep going at full speed all the time. And just making an expectation of rest, even instead of the expectation only being excel, or drive, or contribute, give, share, whatever the offering is. I'm wondering if we can dive into the idea of purpose a little bit. And I'm curious about purpose in the sense of, if you feel like connecting to something bigger than yourself, whether that's gives you a sense of purpose through community, through faith that you both have mentioned, through a cause, a movement, a higher power. What about connecting to something bigger also impacts your mental health? Does it impact your mental health, and how?
Yeah, so I, sort of want to stem from what you were sort of speaking about, Sam, about this idea of faith and community. I think that for me is sort of one and the same, in a sort of a lot of different ways, because I think that, in Catholicism, as well as in, sort of the Torah, there's this really sort of amazing notion that it's actually not good to be alone. That, sort of in, sort of the Bible and sort of the creation story, sort of one of the central messages is that there were people and animals, for Adam and Eve. And so, of course, that I think that's one of the messages that should really be emphasized more and sort of in that story. And I think that, for me, I find that my faith in Catholicism has sort of given me answers to sort of the existential questions that I, as a young person, face sort of on a daily basis, to be 100% honest. And I'm a huge fan of St. Augustine of Hippo. And, he is an amazing figure for a lot of reasons for me. And he has this quote where he says, our hearts are restless until they rest in you, oh God. And he sort of has emphasized this idea of grace and this idea that you sort of can ask God for peace and he'll give it to you. And he did for me. And so I think that, especially prayer, I think that prayer is something that's very often misunderstood. I'm a huge fan of the Danish philosopher, right? I'm a huge fan of the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, who, mentioned how prayer doesn't actually change God, but it does change the person who's praying. And I found that it allows me to sort of have an opportunity to just stop, to rest, and to not sort of worry about what's going on internally in my mind, and being able to sort of connect with young Catholics sort of in the world, especially through a lot of publications like America Magazine or Commonweal Magazine, is sort of amazing in that regard. So I definitely think that my faith and this community, both whether it be at my local parish or whether it be something sort of macro, has sort of been something that has tremendously helped my mental health and has kept it afloat. But I really wonder, what about you, Sam?
I really liked the quote that you were saying about prayer changing the person. I think that's really relevant for me, as like my Jewish spirituality is not necessarily rooted in a belief in a sort of animate God, but in the sort of an acknowledgement and a drive to lean into the beauty and the power of the oneness of all that is and all that isn't. And I also just know that and for me, I've gotten to embrace, prayer through music, especially. And, even though a lot of the words are talking, to or about like a sort of concrete higher power, like even if that is not what I'm particularly like most in tune with, the experience of doing it still makes a difference for me. And then in another vein of being connected to something beyond myself, I think just getting to do things that I care about with people I care about makes me feel connected. Just a few days ago, I got to join my first ever bluegrass jam session. And that was one of the most joyful things I've done recently. And it was just like getting to meet these guys who were just, sitting at the local playing at the local book pub, and they're like, "Hey, you want to play with us?" And so that was really terrific. In the same way, I feel connected and grounded when I've done climate organizing with fellow young people, and just getting to be part of a Jewish community that, again, what you were saying about community being like the foundation of religion and spirituality, and that doesn't need to take a back seat to something else. Like that's the center of it.
Definitely agree.
I love these examples from both of you, and the ways that community comes in different layers, whether those are tight-knit circles or whether it's broader understandings of where you find yourself in the world, and the ways you've brought that to bear on your own mental well-being, and finding places of deep joy and connection is so significant. I am curious, as we wrap up our conversation, if you were doing an interview where the tables were turned and you were asking a young person about mental health, what question would you ask them that maybe didn't come up today?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I think my inspiration sort of comes from you, Sam, because, you sort of mentioned a lot of how important community and connections are to sort of one's well-being. And I, of course, totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's sort of interesting that both of sort of our experiences sort of align in that way. So I would, probably ask someone, how does one's environment sort of affect one's perception on mental health? Because I think sort of a lot of times it can be sort of very confusing for young people why we're feeling the things we are. It could be sort of existential angst and nihilism, especially among, people like me and people like you, Sam, young men. It sort of can be what's it called in a geographical location where one doesn't feel welcome with a specific identity. So that's something I would sort of be interested in asking is how does one's environment affect one's mental health?
Mm-hmm. That's helpful.
Yeah. Well, for one of the core understandings that I've had that's made a big difference in the way that I've tackled my mental health is really along the lines of what Ivan said, is like, the conditions of the broader society play a huge role in the way we feel. And, in that vein, I guess the question I would ask would just be, how would you like conditions in your society to change?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think so much of our sort of mental health problems stem from society and sort of things that are fixable. I think you sort of mentioned, Sam, one thing sort of my advice or your activism, and how I think a lot of our sort of mental health problems as young people comes from policies, regarding climate change, sort of regarding, social rights when it comes to anti-racism and, pro-labor rights and things of that nature. So that I think that's an amazing question that I would be really interested in learning about more.
I want to thank both of you for your time today, because you've brought so many examples from your own life, from your own faith identities, from your own sense of community in the world, and the ways that your own identities are really held with a lot of promise and hope about the paths you're each pursuing in your academic and philanthropic lives. I am really delighted that Springtide could host this. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, thank you as well for having us.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and to learn about the latest research and resources available in our Mental Health and Gen Z series. Springtide Research Institute is supported by donors who believe in the critical research and insight-generating work we do on behalf of young people. Make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options on our website today. Be sure to follow us on social media at We Are Springtide and interact with the resources in the Springtide series on mental health by using the hashtag Mental Health and Gen Z. Today's show was produced by Marta Abawaji. The audio was mixed by Andy Palmer, with original music created by high school student Christian Unthink. Special thanks to the 16 guests featured in Season 7 and to all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Thank you for listening.